Oh my God. Look at you.
Look at you.
No, we were supposed to be together like what, early March or something? And then you were in Colorado and you're like, Tone, I don't think I should be going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I was here visiting this woman I'm dating now, and of course the quarantine hits, and that ticket back to LA was not advisable, so we went ahead and canceled that thing.
You know, you and I always parse words, right? And I just caught the part where you said, you know, I was here with this woman who I'm dating now.
Well, all I can speak for is the present moment, right?
That's true. That's true.
And she's amazing. There's a lot of possibilities there, and it's going really well. So I don't mean to be cryptic and indicate that I'm looking at the back door, but I've just been in enough relationships that haven't worked out that I swore would work out. You know, I'm a bit of a sucker for love that way, so I'm finally getting to the point where I'm measured in what I say in interviews.
Well, listen, if you're going to go out the back door, you better look behind you because there's a brick wall behind you.
There's no escaping this one. Goodness gracious.
Oh,
how are you, man? You looking good. You looking like you got a palace around you.
I have had nothing but silence for the last hour and a half, and now my gardeners are going to show up. Oh, well, we'll deal with it. It's all good.
You know what? This is quarantine broadcasting at its finest, as far as I'm concerned.
And I love this, by the way. I mean, look at the quality. It's good.
It's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like us OGs who've been through the traditional media thing, I feel like we've now gotten to the point where traditional media is actually becoming irrelevant, and new media has completely undercut the power that used to be in only the networks, right?
But also, I think new media is now becoming the traditional media.
Yeah, totally. When my mother has an Instagram, that means it's not new media anymore.
Well, it's like when parents started getting on Facebook, that's when you knew the kids were going to flee.
Yep.
I wasn't that young then, but you started going, wait, I got to go somewhere else because I can't have, you know, my mom or my grandma looking at
Totally. Yeah. Zuckerberg being in court was also an indicator that Facebook might not be the place to be anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
By the way, I just watched the documentary, The Great Hack, on Netflix that basically exposes how that whole thing happened with Facebook, Trump getting in, Brexit, and it all goes back to that data analytics company, Cambridge Analytics.
Look at this. Hold on.
He's got no regard for what's happening here.
He shouldn't. But by the way, he usually always wears a mask. Now he's not wearing a mask. For all pre-corona, he wears a mask. Now in corona, he doesn't wear a mask. What is that?
He's a rebel without a cause. We need to get him a cause.
He's a rebel with an appointment at the emergency room. That's what.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, who in this moment in time is not taking coronavirus seriously? Pretty much every time I know I'm going to be in proximity with people, jogs excluded because I run 12 feet around everybody. But if I know that the possibility of sitting down in a park is going to entail people walking right beside me like they have out here in Denver, Denver seems like the type of place where it's basically all middle-class people who've been privileged all of their life and don't have any idea how to deal with a pandemic.
I agree. I think so. And then you also mix with I grew up in Seattle, right? So it's somewhat similar to Denver.
Yeah.
Not as hot. Although in other ways they are. It's a lot of people who are outside all the time. I mean, it was funny when I moved to New York and then I moved to LA, people used to say to me, oh, you grew up in Seattle, man. Like, did you ever play outside? I'm like, dude, we played outside all the time. Like, it was pouring. I never thought of it. Like, on occasion, it'd be really pouring, but it would rain sometimes for 10 or 15 days. So we'd go outside. We'd play every day.
Yeah.
But kinds of people also just go out and do shit. So sometimes they're either really they know about coronavirus, right, or B, they're like, I've wrestled bears in the woods. I'm good, right? I've managed dengue fever, so I'm good.
Well, that's the thing. Like, to widen out the lens here, we've dealt with stuff before. I mean, the bubonic plague happened. Isaac Newton came up with calculus and the theory of gravity during his year in quarantine. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's got to be something hatching up here in the noodle. I just got to land on something. Right now, I haven't gotten anything nearly close to as important as calculus or theory of gravity, but I'm working on it.
Well, you're a little beyond me. My daughter's in 10th grade, and I'm just about to push her. I can still do the algebra and stuff. It's coming back to me. But now in chemistry, she's reaching a point where I'm like, in about a month, I'm gonna send your ship off because I don't think I can do much of the chemistry anymore. But it's interesting. You talk about the one thing I noticed in looking back is, me, I read everything and I've always done that. That's just what I love to do. And when I heard in January that this shit was happening, in China, and there was some stuff maybe possibly coming here. By the way, my sister works for a very large medical company. She's run it for years up in Seattle with a bunch of doctors under her. And one of her doctors came to her that she's worked with for years and said in late December, said, you know what, first of the year, we should probably start ordering a bunch of masks, a bunch of gowns, and a bunch of visors. And she's like, why? He's like, there's something happening in China. It just doesn't sound like there's some, and he had apparently had, medical colleagues all over the world. And he's like, so they did, they got way ahead of the curve. But anyway, I was looking at the history, and every time a pandemic has just exploded in various areas around the world, what has preceded that has been massive misinformation or delay in action by the government. What happened in Philadelphia, right, in 1918? They kept pushing back. There was something called the Sedition Act, I think, that was passed by Wilson or whoever the hell was the president back then. And it was because they were in First World War. It was like, you can't print anything negative about the U.S. troops. They want to keep morale high. Well, there was an outbreak in Kansas. They trained a lot of them in Kansas, the troops. There was an outbreak in Kansas, and they kept it kind of on the DL. And so what they ended up doing is they sent a shit ton of infected troops to Europe.
Wow.
By the way, it's not really the Spanish flu. The only reason why it's called the Spanish flu was because Spain didn't have a lockdown on journalists, so they could talk. So all your references early on came from Spain, but this happening all over the place.
Wow.
They kept it under wraps so long that in Philadelphia, they were having this, I think, Women's Day parade or whatever the heck it was back in the day. And they pushed to have it. And because it kind of went down in the summer, and I think they had it in the fall or whatever it was. And within a month, like 10,000 people had died.
Wow.
It was devastating. So and you and I have been in the media long enough to know that the out of control, whatever, is not true. And then the super conservative's never true, right? It's always somewhere in the mean, in the middle. So I was thinking right away, well, let me go research all this stuff and see how this usually goes. And there's going to be a lot of misinformation. There's going to be, a lot, and just rely on scientists, because back in 1918, 1919, during the Spanish flu, the scientists were saying, like, it's happening. It's bad.
Yeah.
Talk about this, and nobody did.
And that's the responsibility of media, isn't it? I mean, on the high side, we're supposed to be the ultimate purveyors of information, where we're accountable. We do our research. Everything that comes out of our megaphone is something you can count on. There's integrity. There's rigor around our curiosity. There's fairness, all of that stuff at the forefront. And I saw recently, the other day, I saw Director X having to basically defend himself against an article that came out from a Toronto publication, and a journalist that decided to give him a hard time about sharing what he experienced being a really great solution to coronavirus. Anecdotal. He was very forthright about saying, I am not a doctor, but here's what anecdotally has been working for so many of my friends and I to stave off the coronavirus and keep our immunity high. Things like turmeric, ginger, garlic, things that are proven to be high vitamin C content things that can boost the immune system. It doesn't seem like an audacious claim to put out there to share with one's audience. Director X did that. Next thing you know, he's got an article coming back at him from this publication in Toronto saying that many people had a hard time digesting the information that Director X was proliferating out there, and basically giving him a bit of a villain label for putting out information that was misleading people to think that they didn't need to take the same precautions as everybody else. Meanwhile, that's not what X was doing at all. I even looked at some of these posts. X is a smart guy. He's very responsible with the megaphone that he has. It's a prime example of where media sometimes is going for clickbait, wanting the headline that Director X misleading the people, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's how people don't necessarily regard a recommendation like turmeric in the same way that they could. And X, by the way, did his research. He looked at all the government websites that actually had this article or that article, basically giving credit to these natural ways of fending off a virus. So when I saw this, I was like, oh God, I got to talk to X about what's going down. He even had an Instagram live with the journalist. he invited her to come on and basically have a debate about the merits of her article. She did, so much credit to her for showing up. And then eventually she got humbled in the conversation, realized where her journalistic overzealousness trying to get the clicks basically made this man seem like a villain. And so anyway, the responsibility of media in a situation like this is paramount.
Have you, yeah, and then there's also this divisive nature now. The last couple of years, don't trust the media. But if you go back to the history of dictators and the leaders, what have you, one of the ways they do that is they attack the media, and then they make people take sides. But back to your point, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever read the book Trust Me, I'm Lying?
No.
It's a great book about exactly what you're talking about. It's a guy who ran, like, I think the media side or something of American Apparel back in the day. And he writes about how they figured out that, and this I think really started probably 2000 something, when I think NBC News one night quoted the Inquirer, which like never happened. I think it was Tom Brokaw. They had the Inquirer over the shoulder graphic, right? And I was like, holy Jesus. But the point was in the book was they figured out early on that they could get traction because in this new age of sending little pieces of information out, misinformation to the bottom feeders, the little bloggers who needed something to pop up. And then those bloggers were seen by bigger ones who kind of troll to see, like, is there anything popping? And then they were able to game the system to where it got all the way up to ABC News quoting. And it came from like horseshit stuff. And he shows the path of how they did this repeatedly. He had a friend, I think, who had a book, and he couldn't get on any shows or whatever. So they put up a billboard on Sunset Boulevard. And then they went and defaced it, saying he was a misogynist and all this stuff. Took a picture of it, kind of like, oh, like this, little like, oh my God, see what happened? Fed it to like a low-level blogger who, of course, they're not journalists. So they just spit the shit out, like, oh my God, right. Crazy ass headline, which got picked up and it went all the way to ABC News, and they printed. This guy sold like 200 and some thousand copies in like 2 weeks, but it was all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But can he sleep at night though?
Apparently he wrote a book.
I wonder about that sometimes. I really think about that, where people are doing things that are unethical to get the win, but then at the end of the day, is it a win if they rest their head on the pillow and think about how shitty they were as a human being to get there?
Let me ask you a question. Was it unethical for them to put up the billboard and take a picture and just send it to somebody? Was it?
Well, yeah, if it's purported to be something that if they were the one rigging the game, then I think that's part of the story. But of course, that doesn't end up in the story. So it is manufacturing. But then again, I think if that is wielded for good, then we'd be celebrating that. But oftentimes it's just for self-interest and wanting to be famous, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the great things too about the internet is that, you know, you can find out anything. Like I tell my daughter who's in high school, I'm like, I took her to a library one day and she had to do her homework. And she didn't know how to do her homework because she went to the computers in the library. I'm like, no. And there's the encyclopedias. And she had no know what to do with that, right? I said, if I had Google in college or in high school, oh my God, I would have never gotten a B. But that also, like you were saying, there's always anything ever invented goes two ways, right? One So on the flip side, if you can research anything, you can look at anything. Right. But then again, you can research anything and look at anything. And
right.
Where's the screen of disinformation, misinformation, and all of us have different screens.
Yeah.
Right? And some of us, screens are very wide and stuff can get in. Some of it's very small. And it's frustrating to me in a sense where my whole career was built basically on being honest. Mm-hmm. And if I screwed up, I screwed up, and I mentioned it, and letting those who I interviewed, and you and I both interviewed, A-list people around the world. If there was something that was in the news that day, I would say to them, "Yo, before the cameras come on, I got to ask you this question. You and your PR person better prep, or maybe you already have something to know. I'm going to ask you twice. Mm-hmm. Ask you, you come back with whatever you want, and then I'm going to re-ask the question, and then we'll move on." Mm-hmm. And so that got me respect in the industry. Like, look, I'm not going to sandbag you. This is what I do. It's not what I am, right? Yeah. Like you were saying, got to go home at night, got to sleep well, all of that stuff, right? And
well, what's scary about the media now, whereas we used to have a lot of oversight. We had producers looking at our work, checking the facts. We would also be accountable because we knew that we would need to deal with that publicist later on if we wanted that interview with Usher or whoever. Whereas now I feel like because things have just been flattened, right? Like it's a level playing field. The media is a wild, wild west. Everybody's got one of these. Everybody can broadcast. Everybody's got an Instagram, YouTube, whatever. Is that now it feels like it's whoever's got the most compelling personality, whoever's got the most confidence and ability to use their voice to inspire and compel regardless of the factual substance underneath it or integrity of what they're sharing. And so it feels like it's a bit of a crazy time to be looking at media and trying to discern, because people are speaking with so much conviction that I'm sitting there like, is that the truth? This seems like the truth, but it doesn't really, when I think about it, occur as the truth.
I thought of something one time. I was watching it. It just happened to go through TV, and I just stopped on an old movie just for a second because I was going to go do something else. And I looked, and there was a snake oil salesman coming into a small town, right, selling, you know, this elixir will do this, that, and the other thing. And Google, the internet, Google is kind of like snake oil salesmen can come. They can come right to your house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, this goes back a little ways, but you know, you don't have to open the front door. And I remember one time when I first started at Access, we should tell people, like, we both worked at Access Hall at one point. I think I was about to leave my final year, and I think you just came. I think you actually had a parking spot next to me, and that's how we ended up meeting.
That's right.
I was across from Jay Leno.
Yep.
It was awesome because I would look every day at the new car, and I would take a picture and send it to my dad, because my dad's from the 50s, so he would like the cars. But I think that's how we met. But
yep.
What was I going to say? I had something I was going to say that was important, but
you just got the memory of Jay Leno.
Yeah. What was I going to say? It was early, yeah. Well, funny story. So I'm going down Buena Vista towards. I had owned a rental in Burbank, over not far from the airport. And one day, you know, Jay used to get done with the show. They shut the show from 4:30 to 5:30, and he would get done like around 5. He'd be out of there pretty quickly. Sometimes I'd see him leave with a brown bag. By the way, he packed his own brown bag lunch to get on a private jet to go to Vegas to do his shows. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. So I'm going to my rental to see what's happening there, right? And I think I'm on Buena Vista, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden my car starts shaking, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, are we having an earthquake, right? I'm looking around, and I don't see the wires going like this on the telephone poles. So I'm like, what? And I look, and it's Jay Leno coming up next to me. He had a car that had a jet engine in it, and he's over. Yeah, they take the thing off. He's like this, and people are waving at him. They're Jay, and everybody's like this, and scared to live. Anyway, that's a long story short. But access, they sent me on this thing. Remember when there was a show called To Catch a Predator on NBC? I think it was Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were kind of doing a thing around that because we were NBC. So they sent me in Van Nuys, California, to these Catch a Predator police people, and they rented like a 1-bedroom little apartment to go out of, and they went on, and this woman who was 28, 30, police officer, her voice sounded like a 13 and 14-year-old girl. And so she'd go in these chat rooms, and these guys, and she'd say how old she was, and they were just like a 35-year-old, 20. It was just sickening. And I said, listen, with the internet the way it is, and things are in chat rooms now, so what would you give the advice, to parents who have kids? And she said to me, I'll never forget, she said, would you ever take your 8-year-old or 10 or 12-year-old daughter to the Central Park in a city at midnight on a Friday and drop her off and let her walk around for a couple hours? And she goes, look, there may be good people walk around in love holding hands, but there also might be drug dealers, sexual predators. She goes, if you allow your daughter to have a computer in her room behind a closed door, you are letting in all those perverts from the park. So never ever let them close the door. Never ever let them be by themselves with the computer. And my daughter's now 15 and a half, and we don't do that. That kind of set me up to, but what you were saying is like, it is the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
And everybody's thinking of 10 different ways in which to do stuff. So that was one of the Access Hollywood stores I went on. I was like, oh my God, I'm actually going to use this.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I do feel like it ends up being nowadays that people will be discovered eventually, right? But oftentimes it requires the audience to click through because of the sexy headline of the YouTube video, to watch the video for 3-4 minutes to discover that whoever's talking is actually full of smoke and mirrors and just wanting your views. But I feel like that's the game now. It's like, how can we actually discern sooner than later what we're watching is worth our time or not? And what are the indicators? Have you noticed?
I don't know. It's, I can kind of tell. It's like there's a formula now. There was a great video I saw the other day of this woman who's probably in her 30s or something, a little bit of like maybe a Nordic accent. She's on this private jet. She's like, listen, I do this and do this and this and this, but I'm going to tell you something. All this most of the time is not real. And she walks out of the plane, and as they pull back, it's just a mock-up of a plane. Like
yeah.
And that's like these, some of these guys, if you actually, like a lot of times on Instagram, we'll get these things for like, the amazing, light or the amazing whatever. Just Google that name and look, and like most reviews, these things suck. You can what I do. I just go, okay, what's this called? It's called, night vision for blind people. You can see. And then you go night vision for blind people, and you realize it gets like 97% 1 and 2 stars, right? So that's easier in one sense. But when people are trying to send messages, that's harder to parse. But I've done 5,000 or 6,000 shows in my life. I've probably done as many interviews in my life. You've done a ton. I have a pretty good bullshit meter.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, because some of these people who don't necessarily have the track record that we have, they have such amazing design work and everything looks so good, and then the substance is whatever they make up, right? There's absolutely no journalistic integrity, and maybe that has value too. Maybe opinion-based stuff is still valid, right? It's like, who's to say at the end of the day if someone has a perspective, whether that's invalid or not, because it's not under the guise of a NBC or wherever other networks that we work for. But I do feel like it's one of those things that, like you said, it's like we know the truth by the way it feels, and I mean, that's what we saw so much of at Camera Ready when I was doing these trainings and putting people through, a live in-person training. And we would see time and time again that people that would resonate in the room live weren't the people that sounded technically the most sharp, academic. It was the people that were actually really centered in an authenticity about what they're saying. They're present to what they're saying. They believed in what they're saying. And then how it occurred to us was, well, at the very least, it's this person's truth. It's actually not an agenda wanting me to like them above all. And so that, I feel like, is the thing that always rises to the top, whether it's someone who's journalistically accurate or not. It's like authenticity. That seems like the name of the game right now. Can you be real regardless of how much you know or don't know,
Well, it's funny. I agree with you. I think authenticity and self-awareness. Because all we want as human beings, and you and I have been around the world in all kinds of places and met different people, I feel that they all just want to be acknowledged and maybe accepted or cared for. I mean, really, at the end of the day, and you've been on, by the way, you mentioned something that I don't know what the hell that is. So I'm going to ask you, Caminetti or something? Cametti?
Caminetti sounds like a really great Italian dish. No,
well, there was a guy named Ken Caminetti who played baseball, and I'm sure that's not his method. Before you start, though, so you were on MTV, TRL. You had this very high-profile life, right? And we both. I guess we're both somewhat the same. I don't know, but that was a pretty big thing. And you went through all of that, and then when I re-engaged with you, I had looked up some of your stuff because I read everything, and I was looking. I'm like, it looks like he's gone through something. Like he's found something, or he's looking for something, which we all are. And I agree with you in the sense of, for me, is that what confounded me the most, and this happened when I did an interview with Bono and The Edge. One time we were talking about he has a line in one of the songs that says it's something about the more I learn, the less I know. It's like I kept finding out, like when I would open, like in the 20s, you think you know your shit, right? And then you get in your 30s are like, holy crap, let me get readjusted. In your 40s are like, at least to me anyway, are like you realize when you open one door of knowledge, you're like, awesome. But then you realize you open that door and there are another 1,000 doors. So you're like, oh, I actually know, I don't know squat in the realm of the universe. And it seems like you went through a path where you tried discovering stuff, and you to me seem like you're in a great place.
Well, now I am. Yeah. Last year, if we were talking about this topic at this time, first of all, I wouldn't even been able to get on this broadcast with you. I would have been underneath a lot of darkness. I mean, the thing is, I was definitely in that blind spot of thinking that I knew something, and got married, not really clear on a lot of the boxes that need to be checked to really go all the way with someone. And so there I was, thought I was wholeheartedly, absolutely in love with this woman. And in a lot of ways I was. And in a lot of ways there were things that were just not compatible. And it added up to me not actually being able to sleep And then I had to kind of learn what it is that actually leads to sleep. Like, what is it in terms of peace of mind, and what is out of alignment in my life that I need to get back in line for that peace of mind. And it was quite the rabbit hole I went under, and eventually realized, oh, there are some things that aren't in place in our relationship that really do need to be in place. And I know I'm speaking in vague, very general ways, but I mean, ultimately it's something that I feel like a sense of honor in the relationship. And, you know, the one thing I notice about media is it can be TMI sometimes, because it's like this clickbait culture. So it's like, I did a podcast talking about it, and I shared everything thinking that that would be the way to go about it. And next thing you know, my ex-wife was not happy. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to start speaking in very general terms here because of that. Well, but at the end of the day, I mean, compatibility is compatibility, you know, and I feel like, you know, sometimes I've gone through life confused about what I really wanted, what I really needed, you know, and now I'm crystal clear because I learned the hard way. And I think that's the benefit of being in this life school, is actually having things bump us on the head a little bit to be humble, and then ultimately be humbled enough to look and listen with a deeper sense of curiosity and not so much bravado. Like you're talking about in my 20s, I'm like, I swore I knew a lot. Coming off of MTV, I'm like, you can't tell me nothing. I was on my Kanye. And I was like, boop, okay, I'm not Kanye.
Oh my God. It is a strange time when you go through the first part of that in the 20s. Mine didn't really hit me to my 30s. Because I didn't really kind of make it until my goal was to be in New York on the show by the time I was 30. I was blessed enough to do that. And I was co-hosting Good Day New York, which at the time, when I joined the show, was already #1. Beat the Today Show, beat everybody. By the way, that's where Zucker got the Today Show Plaza, was from, because we did stuff outside.
Nice.
We'd beaten the show, Zucker and the Today Show. But, you know, this started hitting me there. Like, once I was on TV there, then I started getting a lot of stuff, you know, coming at me, and I was meeting very famous people, and I was in, you know, I remember one night I ended up at this little place, and it turns out Sting was debuting his album, I think, whatever it was, and I'm like, oh, and it was like 40. He comes on stage like, oh, we're just rehearsing this, the album's coming out, bear with us, we're probably going to stop a couple times, we don't know what we're doing. I'm thinking, this is like, first off, you have one of those moments like, how did I get here? How did a kid from Puyallup, Washington, you know, a little tribal town outside of Seattle, end up here, and then, you know, go and taking a leak, and then suddenly Sting's next to me taking a leak, and we're having a chat.
So how did you get there? I'm actually curious. I've never heard your origin story. What was the thing that was the breakthrough tipping point? How do you think you made it there?
I think I just had a North Star, and I'm like, I'm doing that. And I felt like, it's funny, you talk about, this isn't because of my parents. My parents are extraordinarily supportive. They were rock and roll rebels from the 50s, and they were just, you know, crazy ass fun people. They always told us to go, like, just go. We didn't have a lot of money. We grew up kind of, you know, we were middle class, but always had a roof over our heads and stuff. But I played sports, and then I blew up my arm. I was at UNLV, a pitcher in baseball, and blew up my arm. I never had a problem in my life, by the way, in baseball. I'm pitching next to guys who end up going to the majors, and I was just as good as them. I mean, you know, I had 4 pitches. My fastball was like 88 to 90 miles an hour. It wasn't super fast, but I had enough. And then I just one day snapped off a curveball. My arm just hung there, and I was like, "What?" I picked up my arm and went, and I was like, "Oh!" And the catcher was like, "Whoa, my God!" And I had this searing pain. But what is, and you know me, I'm a pretty positive guy. I got a little depressed for a while. You know, and a buddy of mine had a radio show at midnight on Friday nights, dude, ripping and reading the news and just drinking a couple of beers, spinning some records, you know, or CDs, well, records and CDs at the time. And then he said, dude, you gotta come up. I was a writer. I was always a writer. I've been writing since I was a little kid. And so I changed my major. My major was economics, corporate finance, because I was really good at numbers. Right. And I had this really, really, really hot professor at UNLV who taught accounting, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't have the best clothes to wear. So I wear shorts a lot. And one day she said to me, you know, if you're going to be anything in this world, you got to dress better. I'm like, look, I don't have a lot of money. She's like, all right. I said, you know what? I'm never coming to this class again. I'm going to get an A. So I did. But so I going through all this, I go up, he said, dude, come up one night. So I go up on a Friday night. And I see what he's doing, right? I'm drinking some beers. He's got a band in that's going to play live at 1 a.m. I'm like, this is awesome. And so on Monday, I went and changed my major to journalism, and with an emphasis in editorial writing.
Mm.
Ass kicked.
Smart.
And then a minor in radio and television. And then I transferred back to a small Northern California school called Humboldt State, which only had 6,000 students, but had a really, really hard journalism community. And so the professors, one was the former editor of Le Mans, one was the former city editor of LA Times, and they just kind of retired up there. So my first paper I got back looked like, it'd been stabbed. It sucked. And then from there, though, what was great about that market, and I'll advance the story really quickly, was it was a small market, Market 187. It's 4 hours north of San Francisco. So it's a small market. There's 221 markets, right, in the country, New York being number one. So I knew there was no union, and I knew they needed bodies. So I took 60-some credits my junior year, so I only had like 10 my senior year. And before I left for the summer, I'm like, look, I'm going to come do an intern. And so I came back in the fall. They gave me a camera, a Hitachi FP21 strapped to a big deck, like all these batteries, and I started shooting football, high school football. I started shooting Oakland Raider football on the weekends. I'd go down, get a press pass. I'd shoot on the sidelines, running like a madman, and 49ers. And I'm like, look, and I just started doing stuff differently. And you talk about like the ways of shooting and doing things differently in the new media. Like back then, we didn't have any special effects, at least in a small market. So I would do like swish pans. I would shoot the carpet and go like this, and then insert it as a swish pan.
Nice. You get resourceful.
Yeah, shoot all my stuff, and then I kept putting my tape to the general manager, saying, "Look, I started producing, writing, editing, doing everything but going on the air for the sports guy at the local station by the time like my January of my senior year." And one day a guy says, "Look, just come in and do, sit in after we're done and just roll some tape. We'll do the sportscast." I didn't even have a jacket or a tie or a shirt, so I had to borrow from friends. And I did it. I was horrible, but I kept putting on the GM's desk, like, look, this guy relieves. And one day on a Thursday, they call me in and said, look, tomorrow night, he's not going to be here at 11:30. You're going to go on live, sink or swim. The great thing was, and this is what I told everybody when I was like in New York and all the interns that came to me, I already knew how to do everything, right? Yeah. I had been producing. So that part of my brain was free to like freak out on going live. I went on 3.5 minutes. I don't have no clue what happened. And they called me 11:35 and said, dude, you got the job. So I did Monday through Friday on a local CBS station, sports job before I graduated. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be in New York. I'm like, I don't know so many days on this planet, man. So I moved to New Hampshire. My next job, I made $825 a month for my first job, or 9,000 hours a week. Moved and got paid $18,000 a year in New Hampshire for a brand new TV station just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. To which on April 1st, I came back from an opening day preview game of the Red Sox, walked into the newsroom, and there was nobody there at 4:30, and we go on at 5 o'clock. And I'm like, what in the world happened? And the janitor goes, go upstairs. I go upstairs, I hear people crying, and I hear the guy who owns the station, who's the richest Irish man in all of North America, Thomas Flatley, he owned Flatley Hotels, saying, this hurts me as much as putting my dog to sleep. We're canceling news as of now. And somebody's like, what? And I learned a lesson really, really early, you can be replaced. So I just said, hey, are you going to honor our contract? So I knew I had a contract. He's like, absolutely, which worked out well because then he tried to renege on him. I said, okay, I'm going to go down and start making some resume tapes. I made 171 resume tapes in the next 7 days and sent them out across the country. But at 4:58:50, when we normally would do the tease for the 5 o'clock news, it went to snow. There was a scroll over bars that said, we regret to inform you that WNHT news is no longer below. Thank you so much for watching it. It went to snow again, and all of a sudden I hear, come and knock on my door, replaced by Three's Company. That taught me like, bam.
Just like that.
So I just did resumes, and then what I did is I figured out New Hampshire's, way up here. I'm going to go across the bottom of the country in U-shape, and I'm going to go back home to Seattle, and I'm going to send out resume tapes all along the way to all these stations. And then in my letter, I'm going to say, look, I'm going to be here on this day at 2 o'clock. I'd like to see you. Now, there's no Google Maps, there's no shit. So you're planning this stuff. And I would call the day before from a phone booth in whatever town I was in to the next town and say, look, I'm going to be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Oh, I can't see. I'm going to be there anyway. I got 100 and some rejection letters. Some of them would be in this business. And then I was in Seattle and didn't have a job and went to the local station there and said, hey, can I edit some resume tapes? And the news director walked in one day and goes, oh, you're not so bad. So I said, look, you put me on for 2 weeks, don't pay me. If I'm no good, don't pay me. I said, no, I'm going to pay something. And then that's all started. And I got
wow, what a story.
Griffey Jr. and, Rennie Johnson, all the Hall of Famers were there and they were young. And I was the youngest at the time sportscaster in Seattle history. So all of them looked at me instead of these old farts. And so that's how I got all my exclusives. And then I got, to Seattle and to New York. And then, I was there.
What a testament. I feel like that's such a testament to how there's a lot of people that want to be the interviewer on national TV talking to Bono, but not everybody is willing to do whatever it takes to get there. You were willing to do whatever it takes.
One quick story. So there was a guy when I was in New York doing Good Day New York, and I was also doing the Noon News as well. And he was probably he was an intern and he became a production assistant. And good looking guy, well spoken, but he wanted, I want to start in New York. I'm like, dude, you cannot start in New York. It's no more market in the world. I said, plus you're going to suck for a while. You don't want people here to see you suck. Get all those things out in the market where nobody knows. Go to some market, just get it out of your system, and then come back. And so he would go out and do some pieces. We'd insert them into some so he could have a resume tape.
Yeah.
Hey, Tony, you got to do this. So finally, he ends up in Birmingham, Alabama. He calls me one day. He's like, "Yeah, thanks. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama." He goes, like, "You sent a brother to the deep south." And I'm like, "Listen, you're great. Send me your tapes." So we kept in touch. And then about 2 years later, I signed a pretty big deal with ABC in Buena Vista to do my own late night talk show. So I fly out to LA. I'm living here now. I run one day. I come in at 6 o'clock after my run, and I see Tom Brokaw saying, "Hey, we want to welcome a new correspondent. Let's welcome Don Lemon to the broadcast." And so I was like, "Oh my God," because Don Lemon was the guy back in New York. And so it was, and it was nice to see. And I've had so many people after that, come to me and say, "Listen, I want to be this, that, or the other," what you were saying. And it's like, no, you got to get things out. You got to work it out, man. Because I suck.
Sounds like you worked a whole lot out, every position in media before you ended up on camera.
Well, it also works because, when you get to New York and you can't shoot anymore or edit, right? If the shooter's doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
If they're jerking you around. But then again, you're not going to make them do stuff that never going to make air.
Right.
So then they start appreciating you because you understand, like, you used to hold the camera, you used to do, all this stuff, right?
Well, that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people want to get on camera so badly that they're forgetting the value of being in the trenches to know how to actually shoot to edit, because then you become way more effective when you get on camera. You're not just blabbering stuff that's going to get lost on the editing room floor. You're getting right to the meat and potatoes, and you're the kind of talent that every freaking network wants because you get right to the heart of the matter.
No, if you're holding a huge camera, you're not going to ask 20 questions because you're like, I'm going to get my 4 questions and get the hell out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
What about that? How did you get to MTV and all that stuff?
Well, I'd tell you the story, but I know you've got a YMCA board call right now.
Hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Hold on. I can do it this way.
Maybe that's for the next episode.
No, tell me. It's good. Don't worry about it.
Okay, yeah, the way I ended up on MTV was actually kind of similar to your story in a way, because I actually started out in campus radio as a DJ. I was actually playing records, back in the day before Serato just completely made it easier to be a DJ. And so eventually my co-host, what's that?
You have a DJ name?
Yeah, it was DJ Profit. And not like Profit the money, but it was DJ Profit as in I was prophesizing through the records I was playing. I would play stuff like Nas and KRS-One and all the really philosophical rappers. So I ended up having a pretty braggadocious name, ironically spiritual, but also braggadocious. And so I started as a DJ, and then the Much Music VJ search was announced. So back in the day, Much Music was our equivalent up in Canada of MTV. And I grew up on it. I watched Master T as like the coolest VJ on the planet. And anyway, this VJ search was announced. I was terrified at the prospect of auditioning live over a weekend in front of all of Canada. I wanted no part of it. I thought, let me just hide behind my records here at campus radio. And then my brother made a point of saying, hey, you really ought to submit something for this because I think you're a VJ. I think you've got everything it takes. So thank God I had someone like my brother talking to me, and I was just smart enough to listen. And so I submitted. What's that?
What was this?
This was back in 1999. And so, yeah, we were going into 2000, and the VJ search was technically in the year 2000. Feels like a whole nother decade era, all of that. And so, yeah, the VJ search was a really wild experience, being on live TV for the first time nationally. And I was nervous. I was nervous, really freaking nervous. And this guy who we met at the initial brunch where all of the finalists, the 7 of us got together and we got to see each other for the first time. I remember thinking, oh, this guy's way more confident than me. This guy's way wittier than me. His name's Bradford Howe. And I thought, oh my God, I don't have a shot in the world. But obviously I'm there. I'm going to go ahead and audition and see what happens. And so sure enough, over the course of the weekend, he proved my theory and he ended up winning. But I was the runner-up and I did well enough. I had another network reach out to me with this other show that they were developing. It's basically Young 60 Minutes magazine show format. And I got a chance to be a writer on that. It was a much smaller platform, but because it was, I got a chance to do more on the show. I think if I had gotten that VJ search and won, I would have ended up being talent and would have been thrown in the fire and learned a lot of things the very hard way. But Vox was a great place for me. It was a little show. Maybe we had 60,000 viewers on a good night, but it was a great show to really learn what it meant to be a host, a writer, a journalist, someone who could tell a story. And so that was my experience doing that for about a year and a season and ended up winning awards. It was a really great show. And that was just enough experience for me to put together a demo reel. And a friend of mine from back in Ottawa, Canada, where I'm from, saw what I was doing. And he was like, let me put together something of an introduction for you to my aunt, who's a senior agent at the William Morris Agency, which is a huge agency. I had no idea, though. I was such a newbie at the biz. I was like, hey, man, if you want to send my reel to your aunt, great. Sounds like nepotism gone right. So go ahead and knock yourself out. And so I put together a reel of what I'd done. He sent it to his aunt. Of course, his aunt's busy representing Whitney Houston at the time and was too busy to look at my demo reel. And it was from her nephew in Canada. I mean, can you imagine, like, senior agent, power agent in Hollywood? My nephew wants me to look at what now? His friend? Okay, put that on the back burner. I got a big deal. I'm negotiating with Whitney Houston right now. And sure enough, I think it was about 6 or 7 months that reel did not get any playtime, not surprisingly. And then finally, this woman, Nicole David, who I think still is in the game representing huge talent, watched my reel. And she was like, oh, yeah, this guy's got potential. Next time he's in New York on a modeling gig, because I was also modeling at the time, we'll get him a meeting with a junior agent at William Morris in New York. And sure enough, I met with this guy, Kenny Goodman. And I walked in and was a little nervous that time too, because it's a big building, New York City, hotshot, new agent. He had that swagger even then. And so Kenny, after 5 minutes, looked at me and he said, you'd be perfect for MTV. Let me see if I can get you a meeting there. He gets on the phone with Scott Venner, who's the talent development guy at MTV at the time. And he gets me a meeting the next day at MTV. So I go into MTV the next day. It's blowing my mind. I mean, it was like the coolest air. Yeah, it's everything. I think Justin Timberlake was coming out of the elevator as I was walking in. I was like, oh my God, okay. And so I walk into Scott's office, and at that point, it's starting to kick in, the big leagues that I'm all of a sudden walking through. Super nervous. I mean, have you ever been so nervous you get dry mouth? You're like, anybody got some water? I mean, I needed water like a marathon runner in the last lap. And I don't know how I'm doing in the interview because Scott is such a poker face. He actually plays professional poker now as a hobby. And so I couldn't tell how I was doing. So there I am doing my tap dance to see if I can get this dream job. And finally, Scott asked me a question that I get a response from that seems like it's less than impartial. He asked me, why do you want to be a VJ on MTV? And I go, well, because I can't sing like Maxwell, and this is the next best thing, man. I love music. What can I tell you? And I get a response. He gives me a little smile, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not bombing, And sure enough, that was enough to have him put me on tape. And then that tape gets circulated over the next 24 hours to every executive in the building who needs to sign off on it. And 2 days later from that meeting, I get a call that they want me to be the next VJ. And what's crazy about it is they weren't even looking for a new VJ. And so it makes me feel like, wow, I really I made some kind of impression there, and they made a role for me where there wasn't one. So just a testament to how much we can make up, because I walked out of that meeting thinking I bombed. I was like, oh, that was terrible. I just completely ruined my opportunity to have this dream job. But then sure enough, I get the call. So it's like, wow, how often we project what we're feeling as if it's reality, right?
And oftentimes it's not. It comes from 9 different places that have no bearing on what really happened.
Yep.
The situation, I was hosting Good Day New York, and doing a lot of stuff and getting a lot of write-ups in the local paper and, you know, Post and all this stuff as the next this and that and whatever it was. And Matt Lauer had just crossed over from like doing Live at 5 and fill in. He was starting to do a lot more. And I think he got the Today Show gig or somewhere around then. And GMA actually had called me and said, hey, you interested in maybe just coming and talking to us? So I met with them at Cafe des Artistes on 67th or wherever it is right on the west side. And then, because they couldn't figure out, people don't remember back then, like the morning shows, other than the reason that the Today Show started doing really well is because Katie and Matt were like brother and sister, and they would just talk, and then it felt like the viewer was the third person, right? So they were, and that was the first time that kind of really, and so the GMA was like, they all stood on boxes and they would, you know, or whatever, and like Spencer Christian was over here, and nobody like interacted. And so they saw what we were doing, this crazy ass wild show. You know, we were giving an Ivy lift and putting Gordon Elliott up in an Ivy lift, going to the second floor, knocking on people's apartment windows in New York, giving them coffees and bagels. It's like bananas, right? You know, we had one guy who had a cigar and he was our guy on the street. And so they were like, oh, this young guy seems to be doing something. And so they invite me. I said, hey, they asked me all these questions. Like, we had Matthew Perry on, and one of our guys walked by during the interview eating a bagel, which like GMA would never happen. And Matthew Perry was like, oh, I'd like one of those. And then we would this whole thing on the bagel. It just went off. And they're like, so how did you guys structure that? Like, how did you plan that? And you know, the camera blocking. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we just have an open thing to do whatever we want. And, you know, the director's awesome. And if it happens, it happens. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get their head around it. So then I get a call from my, so I'm thinking, this is this was horrible. This meeting, lunch was great, but, and then I come out of that and my agent calls me the next day. He's like, look, they loved you. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? He's like, well, they want to do like a mock GMA, run you through a couple of hours. I'm like, okay, cool. I said, I know where the thing is. Like, no, you can't go there. You can't go to the GMA set. They're going to build a whole mock set for you and you're going to go somewhere else. And so I'm like, what? So I end up walking in and they had me do 2.5 hours of GMA by myself. But mock, but real. I guess all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, like in the middle of my year, I get this, there's been a bombing at an abortion clinic 3 blocks from the White House, but live, like, but not real.
Wow.
It was just like and they couldn't figure out, like, oh, well, the other day we gave Spencer Christian made a bet with so-and-so for Diane, who was it? Joan London, for a quarter. We had him walk across and give it to him. And I was like, okay, but I felt like I totally bombed. And then they ended up trying like Tom Bergeron for a little while. But it was just one of those things where I was like, you know what? I really just got to do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. My agent was going to NATPE in New Orleans. He's like, oh, you don't need to go. I'm like, you know what? I need to go because I need to get out of, you know, Fox and what I was doing there. Yeah. And these guys are getting their own talk shows. I'm going to go. I'm going to sleep on your couch if I have to. And we're going to do a deal. And out of there, we talked to Paramount, whatever, and that's how I got my deal for ABC in Buena Vista to do a late night talk show.
Wow.
You think, you know, whatever, but you got to go with your gut, you know. And I told my agent, like, look, I need to be there because FaceTime's important, and the way we're going to get this done is me. And I said, just get me in the room. I can do the room. Just get me in the room. So,
well, that's such a testament too to how that kind of conviction to be able to not defer to one's team at times, right? Like, to be clear, I'm sure maybe an agent or two has had different ideas. Lord knows some of my team didn't really understand why I left MTV when I did, you know, seeing what happened with new media. YouTube came along, less ratings. We started to basically chase our tail. You know, we had an old medium now compared to YouTube where people can go get their music videos anytime. It's like, are we seeing what's happening here? We're being completely made irrelevant. Is anybody else noticing the building is burning? They think we're on the Titanic right now and need to get off? Thankfully, I mean, I pivoted and got into new media, but it's one of those things, but it took some vision, it took some conviction, some faith. And like you, like having to tell your team, hey, this is what I see that's going to work. Let's go. And really being a leader in that way. And I love that it paid off for you. I want to see those tapes now. I want to see, dust off those old beta tapes and show me what you got from back in the day.
I got beta and I got 3/4 inch, brother.
Oh my God. Wow, man. And, you know, who knows what's going to be next in media? That's what's so exciting. It's iterating at such a rapid pace.
Talking about the guy who had an aunt who was an agent. What people watching this in this day and age don't realize is that it took a lot for an agent really to look at a tape because they were tapes and they were stacked. They'd get up, go to a machine, put it in, and they weren't going to, most of them wouldn't do that. And they would watch for 15 or 20 seconds, right? Now, it's easier because you can just send everything. It's a link and what have you. But then it's much, much easier. Now instead of having 100 resume tapes, they now have 1,000 links to go to people. So it's different, right?
True.
So Caminetti, tell me what that is real quick.
It's not an Italian dish named Caminetti or that baseball player. But this is something that I'm actually not even doing anymore because of the divorce. My wife and I were partners in this training company called Camera Ready. So as in, like, to be camera ready is to, traditionally be makeup, hair, wardrobe all together, get ready for the lights and the action. But no, what we looked at was how media trainings were really not serving people from the inside out. It was more so, read this teleprompter. Let's talk about how you use your voice and your inflection and your hands and all of, that, which is really kind of, listen, it has its place. I will completely discount that work. But our theory from self-development work that we had done was that if we work on the core level, beliefs that we have about ourselves, mindset, really emotional intelligence at the end of the day, that everything flows from that authentic place once we strip away all of those beliefs that make us think we need to be something other than what we are. And then we get to the truth of who we are. And then the hands, the dynamism that all the media training prior had worked so much on from the outside in becomes a natural expression of getting to that level of authenticity. And so really it was the work that has been pioneered by all sorts of different self-development companies over the years. We basically packaged it together and we offered it as a media training, right? So that's the storefront to get people in the room who wouldn't necessarily go to a Landmark or Tony Robbins seminar, right? And so we basically combine these worlds, the media training and the self-development, to create Camera Ready, not to be confused with Caminetti. And then, of course, because we were partnering on this, my wife and I, and we were co-facilitating these trainings. I mean, it was a case of having so many hats on with each other, enmeshment 101, constantly being around each other, codependency being at play as well. And so when we went through the divorce, one of the things that came up was that she really wanted to run with Camera Ready, continue to build out that training company. And I said, you know what, let's have a clean break here. You can have it. And so clean break, she's running with Camera Ready. I'm creating something called Media Mastery, which is basically an evolution on what we've done with Camera Ready. And so I'm excited to launch that. Because honestly, like, as we're talking about the history of media, as we've been in it, I feel like the thing that's never going to be irrelevant is our ability to move, touch, and inspire people through a camera, to get into action, whether it's to buy a product, whether it's to come to a service, whatever it is, right? Media has never been more important. And now everybody's got access to it. So the name of the game is, how do we be actually authentic and effective in it, Yep. Oh, by the way, this is funny. I've got a Zoom happening. Hey, can I call you right back? I'm actually finishing up an interview right now.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, I'll hit you right back. So yeah, case in point, right? Like, media is essentially, even now, personal communication. When we hop on FaceTime with someone, guess what? That's communication. That is media.
It is.
And so are you effective in your relationships in that way too? So it's just a really dynamic thing to really think about, like, communication as really the key to life, and being able to translate the communicator we are in personal life to what we have on camera. That's the name of the game.
I was lucky, real quick story. I was in Northern California in college.
Mm-hmm.
A guy in San Francisco who was really good. I watched him on the air. His name is Mark Ibanez. He did sports, but he wasn't like a sports dude, He was just like a dude, and he was conversational. So I called him up on the phone. I'm like, yo, I'm this guy who sucks. I'm in college, but I want to do what you do someday. Can I come hang with you? And he's like, yeah. So I went down and spent some time with him. And I said, look, what would you tell me? I said, what would you tell yourself who's 20 years old? He goes, what somebody told me in the same position you are now when I was in your age. And I go, what? And he goes, don't try to be, he goes, it's going to sound obvious, but don't try to be Joe Anchor. Just be yourself. And here's why. Because live in television, shit's going to go wrong at some point.
Yeah.
You have to think for half a second how Joe Anchor would react as opposed to reacting exactly like you would react. He goes, the audience will know that, because the audience in a split second will react the same way you are if you are truly you.
Mm.
And kinship to you, and they'll feel like, yo, I can have a beer with this guy. And shit you not, 11 years later, I'm in New York City, and they do a research on me, Q rating and all that stuff, right? And one of the things that came back was, we feel like we could have like a beer with this guy.
Yeah.
So, a picture of that, the old days in the camera, and took that and sent it to him. He was still at the time, and wrote him a note and said, you don't remember me, but years ago you told me to be this way, and people would want to have a beer with me. Look, the research says they want to have a beer with me. And it goes to saying, as long as you're authentic, it's not the mistakes you make, it's how you recover from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so really what you were saying earlier is the line I have a lot when I help people out and consult with them is, you need to showcase opportunity to grab attention, because we're all the attention game. Everything, Toyota, Walmart, you, me, NBC, whatever, influencers. And if you don't know how to showcase your opportunity, you're not going to get the attention, and we need attention to be able to monetize. So
that's it. That's it. That's exactly it, man. Woo, what a conversation.
We have so much more to say too. Oh my God.
Man. We could do a part 2 for sure. This is great.
Great to see you. I'm glad that you didn't come back, that you're there. Things are working out. And then we'll talk about relationships and things we've both learned about how trying to bleach red flags white, and it doesn't always work.
Ain't that the truth, man.
All right, man.
Woo. Love this.
Love you. Have a good time.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye. I'm gonna turn there we go. Awesome.